It's incredibly easy to see when a club team is falling apart right in front of your eyes because it feels like it just happened so suddenly. Manchester United over the last decade, AC Milan in the 2010s, Liverpool in the early 2010s, and the list can go on really. But one massive fall off that's been staring us all in the face for quite some time now is that of the Brazilian national team. That's right, everyone's second favorite national team, unless you're Argentinian. The creators of Joga Bonito, the 5-time World Cup champions, have been crumbling for quite some time now. And although we're talking about a national team and not a football club, this is still a massive footballing institution that we're talking about here. And one massive event that's happened recently that's shown that these guys really are in free fall, in case anyone was still doubting, was their recent loss in the World Cup qualifiers to their biggest rivals Argentina 4-1. And it's crazy too because it's not like Argentina got lucky and somehow managed to squeeze 4 goals past a good Brazilian side. They completely smacked them up this game, and it honestly became a very embarrassing watch from a Brazilian point of view. You had Emi Martinez, one of football's biggest housers, out there doing kick-ups in his own box. Like, it literally cannot get any worse than that. This performance from the national team, along with poor performances in international competitions like Copa America, have led to La Seleção sacking Dorival Jr., their head coach. And right now, the chances that Brazil have a good World Cup in 2026 are looking very slim, I'm not gonna lie. It's potentially shaping up to be a very embarrassing tournament for them. But before we look into the future, we need to see how they even got into this position in the first place. And real quick boys, if you're new to the channel, enjoying the content, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. We're dropping weekly football videos, so make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss an upload. And if you're not new to the channel boys, welcome back, glad to have you around for another video. But with that being said boys, let's get into how Brazil got into this position of a free fall in the first place. So you might be asking yourself, when did this decline start? Well, some might say that the decline of the Brazilian national team, and Brazilians, you might want to look away for a quick second, started when they got battered 7-1 at home to get eliminated from the 2014 World Cup by Germany. I mean, that day is literally a traumatic event for every single Brazilian that is currently alive, and to an extent this was the beginning of the fall off for them. They had a few things come up positive for them here and there, but really it's just been a gradual decline since up to this point. In the aftermath of the World Cup disaster in 2014, Luis Felipe Scolari would essentially resign in disgrace and left the future of the team up in the air. Looking ahead from that point, Brazil really had two things that they really needed to focus on: the 2015 Copa America and World Cup qualifiers. Dunga would take over as head coach of the Brazilian national team for a second time, having been in charge from 2006 to 2010, and pretty successfully, as he would manage a 69 win percentage in his first reign. But his return would come with a little bit of controversy because of the fact that he was bringing a more pragmatic style of play to La Seleção, and this doesn't really suit the idea of playing the Brazilian way, you know, with the flair and the Joga Bonito, all that good stuff. And this realistically has been one of the biggest grievances with the Brazilian national team for quite some time now. Not only are they not winning major tournaments like they used to, but they more or less have abandoned the main identity that made them so successful in the first place. It's like when celebrities become corporate sellouts. And from a player pool standpoint, aside from Neymar, this period for Brazil was very lackluster and they did not have many stars in that side. In fact, it was a pretty stinky side aside from Neymar, if we're being honest. But nonetheless, the main focus for 2015 would be Copa America. The tournament would get started off in a pretty spooky manner when Brazil gave up the opening goal in their first match from a David Luiz mistake to allow Peru to go up 1-0. But largely due to the brilliance of Neymar, Brazil was able to fight back and claw to get 2 goals that ended up winning the match 2-1. This was definitely a shaky start, right? But the guidance and the passion of Neymar and playing for the Brazilian national team definitely should have been enough to get them through, right?
A tentativa por baixo, batida, olha o gol! Olha o gol! Olha o gol!
Well, it all went almost as terrible as possible. So Neymar, for receiving a straight red card, was already facing missing 1 match. However, CONMEBOL decided to further investigate his actions after the match and ended up serving him a 4-game ban, ruling him out for the rest of the tournament. And go figure, a very bad Brazilian side without Neymar would go on to struggle for the rest of the tournament. They just about beat Venezuela 2-1 in the last round of the group stage, but would be eliminated in the quarterfinals in embarrassing fashion against Paraguay in penalties. Paraguay team that had just lost 6-1 to Argentina. This was very embarrassing for La Seleção. They were just beginning to shake off the effects of the 7-1 defeat to Germany, and this felt like a massive step back. It also set into motion the idea that this Brazilian side was just way too reliant on Neymar. But alas, all they could do was move forward from here, and realistically that's what they did, because they still had World Cup qualifiers to play this year, and in the 4 that they did play, they'd managed to win 2, draw 1, and lose 1. Not the worst record in the world, so they set themselves up for decent success moving forward. So now for 2016, Dunga would stay on as the head coach as they were approaching another Copa America, and they didn't want to shake the boat too much. And in the lead up to this tournament, Brazil would have a very poor qualifying window as they would draw against Paraguay and Uruguay. This perhaps should have been an omen for how the tournament was about to go. Oh, and by the way, Brazil for this tournament were pretty much left to fend for themselves because it was announced that Neymar would not be participating in this year's competition.
But that's simply not possible.
Why isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why not, you stupid bastard?
So it was time for guys like Coutinho and Willian to step up to the plate and show that this national team was not all about Neymar. But if 2015 was bad, 2016 Copa America Centenario edition was a massive failure, and Brazil would end up getting grouped by Peru and Ecuador. After drawing against Ecuador in the first round and rightfully obliterating Haiti in the second, Brazil needed just 1 point against Peru to advance to the next round, but failed to do so. A controversial goal from Peru would see La Salazar pack their bags up early and head home. And after this disappointment, Dunga would be let go from his position, and Brazil again were left to regroup. Tite would be appointed head coach of the national team, and his approach would be interesting. For Tite, he looked at his time with La Salazar as an opportunity to bring in a more tactical and European style of play to Brazil. And for some time, he only really had one main objective: make sure Brazil make the 2018 World Cup. So realistically, with just one task ahead of him, Tite would lock the team in as they would go undefeated for the remaining 12 match weeks and finish on top of the CONMEBOL qualifiers. With this massive turn taking place and the team getting marginally better on paper from years prior, there were once again huge expectations on this side to win the World Cup, as they were either set as favorites or a top 2 to 3 contender for the competition. And so how did Brazil do with these expectations? Well, they would have a slow start to the tournament as a tough Switzerland side led by Swiss Messi Shaqiri would give Brazil some problems, and the two would see out a 1-1 draw. From here, Brazil would go on to struggle against Costa Rica, but got over the line with a 2-0 win thanks to some Neymar magic, and then would make light work of a disappointing Serbian side. These results would allow for Brazil to finish the group phase as leaders, which would give them an easier round of 16 match where they would play a Mexican side that had been getting progressively worse in the tournament. This match ultimately would prove to be light work for Brazil, and in the next round they'd be facing their biggest test yet, the peak iteration of Belgium's golden generation. If Brazil could get past this test here, there was potential for them to really go on and make something out of this tournament. Finally put the demons from 4 years ago behind them, go on to potentially win it all. This was their chance. And well, they pretty much fell at their first hurdle. For Brazil, this somewhat early departure from the World Cup would just end up creating more questions and answering them. After seemingly finally getting it all together and building a more reliable team around Neymar, they flopped very hard at this tournament. They never really put up much of a fight when it really mattered, and it seemed like they were just getting tactically exposed left and right. For manager Tite, given all the hard work he had done to be able to get them to that point in the first place, he had bought himself some time and would carry on in the job after the World Cup. Next up for Brazil was Copa America in 2019, which was set to be hosted in Brazil. This time around, the squad would have to bear the weight of once again missing their crown jewel of Neymar. This time he suffered an ankle injury and would be ruled out of Copa America, and it would be up to his compatriots to secure the title. So this time around in the competition, a Brazil side that had been very well drilled by Tite wasted no time in the competition. They would steamroll through the group stage as they beat Bolivia 3-1, Peru 5-0, and drew with Venezuela to secure first place. Their quarterfinal matchup would see them face their past demons Paraguay, and this match would once again go to penalties, and despite the hearts of all Brazilians fearing the worst, they would be able to get past Paraguay this time around. From here, Brazil would win the semi-final that felt like a final as they beat their rivals Argentina 2-0 thanks to Firmino and Gabriel Jesus. And in the final, Brazil would face a side that they had already beaten before in Peru, and there would not be much of a different story here as Brazil would come out on top 3-0 on home soil. And despite missing Neymar, Tite would prove his haters wrong. Yes, he was playing a slower, more tactical style of play and sort of setting the Brazilian flair aside, but he managed to win Brazil their first Copa America since 1989. That is massive without a shadow of a doubt. To this point, if you had to chart out the trajectory of the Brazilian national side, it was definitely a downward slope with a couple of peaks here and there, with the 2019 Copa America being one of those peaks in morale. But from here on out, all eyes would be set on the next Copa America and World Cup in hopes to fully kick off a redemption tour. The following year, they only really played 4 qualifiers, so it was pretty straightforward. They would end up winning all of them. So we pretty much time skipped to the year of 2021 where we had Copa America. In the lead up to the tournament, Brazil would continue to win games in the qualifiers pretty convincingly, and you saw names like Vini Jr., Rafinha, and Rodrigo get integrated into the squad a little bit more. And by the time the Copa America kicked off, Brazil were definitely favorites, and with Neymar back in the side as well, the pressure was on to repeat their championship. Well, even with expanded groups, Brazil would still manage to steamroll their way through the groups champions, as they would go undefeated and secured first place. The last time Brazil had lost any match was in 2019, and the last time they lost a competitive match was 2018. So the writing was on the wall for this potentially to be a great tournament for Brazil, and they continued to feel that way after Brazil got through 2 tough matches against Chile and Peru to make it to the final. The performances for this side definitely got a lot more pragmatic as the tournament went on, but nonetheless Brazil were in the final and had the chance to become repeat champions. Unfortunately for La Seleção, the footballing gods were on Messi's side this day, and Argentina would see out a 1-0 victory in order to win their first title in 10 years. And remember how I said before that there was a big gripe with this team, that it was too focused on Neymar as the sole driving factor for this team? Well, this was in full effect for this tournament. Brazil struggled a lot in the final, and it was due in large part to the fact that Argentina were able to keep him quiet. Yes, Brazil was winning matches and they had that long undefeated streak, but with Neymar getting older, sooner or later Vini Jr., Rafinha, Rodrigo, they needed the torch passed to them soon. But after this, Brazil was able to shake off the bad juju and lock in for the 2022 World Cup qualifiers, because they would go on to finish first place with a near perfect record as they did not lose a single match. But just like last time, because of their performance in the qualifiers, they now had huge expectations going into the 2022 World Cup, having not won the World Cup since 2002, facing disappointing exits almost every single time since, having that undefeated streak in the qualifiers. Brazil needed a massive tournament to start turning the tides. With Tite having spent plenty of time in his position, there was hope that he would be able to match up tactically when it came to playing against other big European sides. And with a now star-studded squad, as Brazil had a couple of breakthroughs of some stars since 2018, all eyes were on La Seleção. Well, as had become custom, Brazil managed to get first place in the group stage, this time getting the better of Switzerland and Serbia, but suffering a spooky loss against Cameroon. But not much was made of this loss, because Brazil did rotate heavily for this match since they already had first place secured. From here, Brazil would face South Korea in the round of 16 and absolutely obliterated them 4-1, as the spirit of Joga Bonito had finally re-entered these guys. With 2 solid performances under their belt and the absolute spanking of South Korea, there was a belief that Brazil could make a solid run to the final, and their next step was getting past an aging Croatian side. And this game ended up being a grueling one. After a scoreless 90 minutes that would be very even, the match would go to extra time, which is where it got spicy. At the 105th minute, Neymar once again proved to be the shining light in the team, as he would pull La Seleção up while also scoring a goal to tie Pele's international record. The writing was on the wall for Brazil, but at the 117th minute, Brazilian hearts sank as Croatia would win a penalty that they would slot away to equalize the match and take it to penalties. Here, misses from Rodrigo and Marquinhos would send Brazil packing home, and thus stamping this tournament with yet another quarterfinal exit. Ultimately a disappointment. Question marks were once again raised on why this team was so reliant on Neymar, and why he didn't even take a penalty in the shootout to begin with. Tite would suffer the fate of a sacking. Despite the Copa America, he would have those 2 disappointing World Cups, which ultimately was enough for him to get the boot. So Brazil spent all of 2023 with 2 interim managers, and eventually appointed Dorival Jr. in 2024. Dorival was tasked with a few things. Firstly, bring identity and trophies back to Brazil. Secondly, qualify for the 2026 World Cup. And third, the 2024 Copa America. So with his first opportunity for a trophy, how did he do in 2024? Oh brother, this tournament was a shocker for Brazil. Neymar would miss this tournament due to injuries. Now Vini Jr. had essentially been given the keys to Brazil. This time around, they were not able to even secure first place in the group, as they were outshined by a brilliant Colombian side. They would fail to even score a goal against Costa Rica in a 0-0 draw. They did beat Paraguay 4-1, but they then struggled and at least managed to salvage a point against the aforementioned Colombian side in a 1-1 draw. A draw that I was actually present for. Throughout all these games, Brazil just looked terrible. The attack had no flow, they would give up sloppy chances, and the team just felt like they had no chemistry. Some felt that the lack of Neymar on the side was a catalyst for performances like this, while some believed that Dorival Jr. was just out of his depth. And some believed that players like Vini Jr., Paqueta, Rafinha, Rodrigo just were not doing enough. Nonetheless, Brazil would end up getting bounced out at the quarterfinals again, as they would come up just short against Uruguay in penalties. This meant that for their last 7 major competitions that I talked about in this video, in 5 of them, they would get bounced out in the quarterfinal. You cannot tell me this is not one of the lowest points for the Brazilian national team in recent history. It's getting spooky, and since this Copa America, it has not gotten much better. They're currently 4th in the CONMEBOL qualifiers, and they already have the same amount of draws as the entire 2022 run, and they already have 5 losses. They've been majorly inconsistent. They've been lacking Neymar this entire time. Stars like Rodrigo, Vini, Paqueta, Rafinha, Militao, Marquinhos, they're just not stepping up to take those leadership positions. The team is lacking a spine, it's lacking identity, it's not playing the Brazilian way, which got this team so much success in the 2000s and in the 90s and the 80s and the 70s. But it's not even just that, they're not playing with any cohesion either. When when they're on the pitch, they're just running around like headless chickens. It seems like there's no chemistry. They're not playing for each other. They're not playing for the jersey. They're all just playing as individuals. Dorival Jr., like I mentioned earlier in the video, he has gotten sacked, and there are rumors for who's potentially taking over. Currently, there's a lot of rumors for Ancelotti. There was a couple of rumors for Klopp and for Pep in the past. Pep did just sign an extension with Man City, and Klopp is technically a free agent, so who knows who's going to step up to become the manager of Brazil. It's a lot of contention if they should even have a foreign manager, because Brazilian managers have already brought them so much success, but time will tell, because they really need to get it together for the World Cup. Because as we've seen, all this has really culminated in that hugely embarrassing loss to Argentina. They really got dog walked that game. They stood no chance, and if they rock up like this to the World Cup, it's just going to be another embarrassment. Heck, if they keep on playing this way, you're telling me there's not a chance they potentially miss out on the World Cup? They're 4th place, guys. There's a chance. There's a chance. It's probably not going to happen. They probably will get there, but there's a chance. You guys can let me know what you think. Is Joga Bonito dead? Will Brazil make it to the World Cup? Will they have a good World Cup? All I know is Neymar's going to rock up to the World Cup in a wheelchair.